Hello, 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 and welcome back to AI Café Conversations, where neuroscience meets AI for executives. I am Sahar Andrade, your AI whisperer. I am also a Forbes Coach Council official member and an executive coach. Today, I want to challenge the way we talk about empathy in leadership. This is our extra episode. This is the extra flavor of coffee that I started putting for you on Fridays. This is not our usual Wednesday regular podcast that we have. So I just thought maybe a shot of espresso would be nice on this Friday before going on the weekend. Anyhow, everyone praises empathy as a superpower, including myself. But the truth is, without self-awareness, empathy collapses. And you look at me and like, are you crazy? Actually, no. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to take you in this episode. We will explore the neuroscience of empathy and self-awareness. Why leaders often miss their own blind spots, and how AI coaching tools for executives can help mirror back the truth they can't always see. Because the real leadership superpower isn't just feeling for others and be a sponge and just absorb all that pain and anxiety and stress and become burned out. But it all depends on step number one, which is first knowing yourself. And we're going to talk about self-awareness today.
Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to, cut through the noise and get you really informed on topics that matter. Okay, imagine this scenario. You're a leader. You've heard it constantly, right? Empathy is the key. Maybe you've even done the training, taken the notes. But what if? What if that traditional empathy training is actually, making things tougher for you, for your team, not better? Today we were diving deep into a really fascinating piece from Forbes. It's by Sahar Andrade, called Rethinking Empathy, Neuroscience of Self-Aware Leadership. It challenges some really common ideas. It offers this science-backed look at what truly drives impactful leadership. We're going to dig into why just focusing on empathy might, backfire, and what the neuroscience actually suggests is a more effective way forward.
Exactly. And our mission here really is to unpack that neuroscience, the stuff behind emotional intelligence. And crucially, to draw a line between empathy and compassion. They're not the same thing. And ultimately, we want to reveal this leadership superpower that often just gets missed. It's all about self-awareness and emotional regulation. So yeah, get ready to maybe question some things you thought you knew, get some practical tools, and figure out what leading with real presence actually looks like.
Okay, so this brings us straight to what the article calls the empathy training paradox.
Yeah.
Sahar Andrade shares this, pretty stark story from one of her sessions. She asks a room of leaders, okay, who's had empathy training? 37 hands go up. Lots of people. But then she asks, all right, what's the first cornerstone of emotional intelligence? And crickets. Silence. Not one hand. These are experienced execs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But with all that training, they couldn't name the absolute foundation, self-awareness.
Yeah. And that's where the author uses that really powerful analogy that we've been training leaders to be emotional lifeguards who can't swim. It just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? Trying to rescue others from tricky emotional waters when you're, flailing yourself, not grounded. It's this fundamental problem, like trying to pour from an empty cup. You can't give what you don't have, essentially.
That lifeguards who can't swim idea, wow, it really sticks with you. But what's happening inside our heads biologically that makes us so prone to soaking up other people's feelings, even when we're trying to be helpful? The article talks about something called the mirror neuron trap. What's that about?
Right. So we have these fascinating brain cells, mirror neurons. They don't just fire when we do something, they fire when we see someone else do it. Or even when we see them feel an emotion. Now, this was super important for our ancestors, quickly sensing danger or bonding within the group. But here's the catch for leaders today. Without good self-regulation, these mirror neurons become, like the article says, a mirror trap. Instead of just observing or understanding, you start reflecting every single anxiety, every stress, right into your own limbic system. That's your brain's emotional center, the part dealing with feelings, survival.
And this isn't just a theory, is it? The article gives a pretty vivid example. This VP, Sarah, she took all the empathy training to heart, felt everything they feel, and ended up having panic attacks. She couldn't switch it off. Became an emotional sponge, as the article puts it. So if you're absorbing stress like that, what does it physically do to you? to your brain, your body.
Ah, yeah. That leads straight into what's called the cortisol catastrophe. When you soak up other people's stress, your body's stress response system, the HPA axis, it doesn't really know the difference between your crisis and theirs. It just floods your system with cortisol. And the article calls cortisol your brain's worst enemy. For good reason, too. It's kind of like, imagine someone slamming the brakes on your car while you're hitting the gas. You're trying to be empathetic, trying to connect, but your brain is basically caught in this physiological gridlock.
Okay, so if cortisol is literally slamming the brakes on our thinking, what are the real lasting effects? How does it impact a leader's ability to make good decisions, show real empathy when they're constantly dealing with this cortisol flood?
Well, the long-term effects are pretty significant. Chronic cortisol, it actually shrinks your prefrontal cortex. Think of that as your brain's CEO planning, decision-making, genuine empathy. That gets smaller. And meanwhile, it actually beefs up your amygdala. That's like the brain's alarm system. So you become hypersensitive, constantly scanning for threats for the next crisis. You basically get stuck in this loop, always on edge, always reacting instead of, thoughtfully responding.
Wow. So if absorbing stress leaves us so, depleted and reactive, it makes you wonder, are we even thinking about empathy the right way? The article mentions research from the Max Planck Society drawing this really sharp line between empathy and something else, compassion. It defines empathy as feeling what others feel. Like we just talked about, that can activate your own pain networks. It leads to empathic distress. The article puts it pretty bluntly. Empathy, in this sense, can create two victims, that whole I feel your pain thing.
Exactly. And that's where compassion is so different. That Max Planck research, it showed compassion lights up completely different brain areas, networks linked to care, positive feelings, motivation to help. So instead of distress and two victims, compassion gives you this drive to find a solution. Compassion is more like, I see your pain and I want to help, not I feel your pain. So yeah, the article is clear. One drains you, potentially creates two victims. The other one, it creates a solution. It empowers constructive action.
And that distinction feels really important. So how does a leader, maybe in a tense moment, make that shift? Go from the draining, I feel your pain, to the more constructive, I see your pain and I'm here.
Well, that ties right into another key idea that often gets missed in leadership training, interoceptive intelligence. It sounds fancy, but it's basically sensing what's going on inside your own body. Your heart rate, your breathing, that knot in your shoulders. These aren't just physical things. The article calls them emotional data streams. Your vagus nerve, for example, is constantly sending messages between your brain and body, affecting your heart rate, how you engage socially.
Okay, emotional data streams. I like that. But how tuned in are most leaders to this internal data? And what happens if they're just not listening?
Honestly, most leaders aren't very tuned in at all, and that's a problem. Because if you lack that interoceptive awareness, you can't really tell the difference between your own emotional state and what's coming from your team. And when you're unaware, as the article says, your biology drives your behavior unconsciously. You might think you're responding to the situation out there, but actually you're reacting from your own internal state, which you haven't even acknowledged.
That unconscious biology driving things. Yeah, that sounds like a perfect setup for being inauthentic, doesn't it?
The article talks about this artificial harmony problem, especially with Gen Z being quick to spot fakeness. How does that corporate emotional theater actually harm a team?
Oh, it's incredibly damaging. People, and especially younger generations, have sharp BS detectors. If a leader is just mirroring emotions, trying to look empathetic, but isn't genuinely regulated inside, it creates this feeling the author calls corporate emotional theater that nobody believes. It's like that other analogy. A drowning person trying to save another drowning person. Yeah. There's this mismatch between what they're projecting and what's really going on internally. People sense that misalignment, and it just erodes trust. Okay, so if just being empathetic can backfire, and being tuned into our own body's interoception is so vital, what's the actual path forward? The article really pushes for the self-awareness solution. But, for a lot of busy leaders, focusing inward feels, selfish. Executives might push back, right? Thinking, my job is to put my people first. But the article flips that, saying, taking care of yourself is putting people first. How does that work? It sounds contradictory.
It sounds contradictory, but it makes perfect sense biologically. You simply cannot give what you don't possess. When you, as a leader, are grounded, regulated, you're actually able to serve your team effectively. You shift from being, one crisis away from breaking to being genuinely ready, willing, and able. And the neuroscience backs this up strongly. Research shows when a leader gets their heart rhythm into a coherent state, balanced, steady, their whole nervous system syncs up. And that coherent state, it's contagious. Teams literally, unconsciously entrain to their leaders' regulated rhythm. It's fascinating.
Contagious coherence. That's a powerful image. But still, that idea of prioritizing self-awareness, it can feel like a hurdle, like it's taking time away from the team. How do we get past that ingrained perception?
It really requires a fundamental mindset shift. We need to stop seeing emotional regulation as some kind of soft skill luxury and start seeing it as the core leadership competency. The biggest pushback the author mentions is exactly that. I don't have time for self-reflection. You can picture it, right? That startup founder running on his fourth espresso, insisting it's a luxury they just can't afford.
Yeah, I can picture that. So what's the actual cost of that no-time attitude?
Well, the article delivers a pretty stark warning there. It says, this mindset is what makes everything harder. Sure, that constant adrenaline might feel productive for a while, but burnout is almost inevitable. The analogy used is intense. It's like pouring kerosene on the floor and lighting a match. Those burning flames make the room brighter at first, but total destruction follows. You're essentially sacrificing long-term sustainability, your own and your team's, for short-term intensity.
Yikes. Okay, that's a sobering thought. So what's a realistic first step? Something practical to break that cycle. The article suggests a 30-second brain reset. It says, before every team interaction, just take 3 deep breaths plus a 30-second body scan. Check your heart rate, notice tension, feel your breathing. It sounds almost too simple. What's actually happening in our brain during those 30 seconds?
It's simple but profound neurologically. Those deep breaths and the quick body scan, they deliberately activate your parasympathetic nervous system. That's your body's rest and digest or calm and connect system. It directly counters the fight or flight stress response. It creates a pause, a bit of space, allowing your prefrontal cortex, your thinking brain, to come back online before you engage with others. It's about intentionally shifting your own state first.
Okay, that makes sense. Shifting your state first. Another really interesting tool mentioned is the emotional granularity factor. This idea is about getting specific with your emotions, not just saying I'm stressed. So instead recognizing, okay, I'm actually frustrated with these unclear expectations, or maybe I'm feeling anxious about getting these resources. How does just naming the feeling more precisely actually help us manage it? That's the science there.
That specificity is huge. When you can label your feelings with more precision, more granularity, it helps create new neural pathways. Instead of the amygdala, that quick trigger alarm bell, just sounding a general alarm like stress, danger, getting specific engages the prefrontal cortex more, your problem-solving brain. So for leaders, developing this emotional specificity allows you to identify, understand, and then regulate your own response before you react or try to engage with someone else's emotions. It helps you move from just feeling overwhelmed to thinking, okay, what's really going on here and what can I do?
This all sounds incredibly valuable, but maybe like a whole new skill set to learn. Can anyone actually get better at this? Or are some people just born more self-aware? The article offers something called the neuroplasticity promise.
Yes, and this is so crucial. The neuroplasticity promise is basically the science saying your brain can change. It can learn new patterns, new ways of responding at any age. Research on neuroplasticity is really clear about this. When you consistently practice emotional regulation techniques like the breathing, the body scan, the specific labeling, you literally rewire your brain. Areas like the anterior cingulate cortex involved in regulation become more active. The prefrontal cortex gets stronger connections, better able to manage the amygdala's impulses. It's a real physical change. But, and this is key, it takes deliberate practice, not generic empathy training. You have to actually do the work.
Okay, so deliberate practice can rewire our brains. This leads us to a really fundamental point the article makes, the contagion choice. Every leader is making a choice, consciously or not. What exactly are leaders broadcasting, and how does that spread through a team like a contagion?
You're constantly broadcasting your nervous system state. Constantly. It happens through tiny things, micro expressions on your face, the tone of your voice, your posture, your body language, your team's mirror neurons. They pick up on these signals, often completely unconsciously. It's this deep biological resonance happening all the time. So when you show up regulated, calm, centered, you essentially give everyone else permission to regulate too. You create a calmer environment. But the flip side is also true. If you show up anxious, stressed, reactive, you inadvertently teach your team that that's the appropriate response to pressure. You spread dysregulation.
That's huge.
Yeah.
It really reframes leadership impact, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Which brings us to the article's big claim. Self-awareness is the real leadership superpower. It even says that when leaders stop trying so hard to be empathetic and focus instead on becoming aware and regulated, genuine empathy just emerges naturally. How did that work? How does regulation unlock empathy?
It works because a regulated nervous system actually has the capacity for genuine connection and understanding. Think about it. A dysregulated system, caught up in that cortisol catastrophe, with a hyperactive amygdala, it's fundamentally oriented towards survival, self-protection. It just doesn't have the bandwidth, the internal resources for nuanced understanding or deep connection because it's too busy fighting its own internal fires. So when you cultivate that internal calm, that self-awareness and regulation, you create the necessary space within yourself for authentic empathy to arise naturally without that draining absorption we talked about earlier.
So it's moving beyond just personal well-being. Emotional regulation becomes an actual organizational strategy.
Yeah.
And the key question shifts, right? Not just, how can I be more empathetic? But, as the article suggests, asking yourself, what emotional state am I creating in this room right now? Why is that question so transformative?
Because it recognizes that your own nervous system is arguably the most powerful leadership tool you have, full stop. When you shift your focus from an outward, how do I fix them or feel like them, to an inward, what energy, what state am I bringing into this interaction, it changes everything. It moves you from potentially being that overwhelmed emotional sponge or the drowning lifeguard to being a grounded, clear, present leader who can genuinely support, guide, and uplift their team. It fosters an environment where people feel safer, think clearer, and can actually thrive together. That's not just better leadership. The article calls it transformation. And I think that's right.
Wow. Okay, that really does reframe things. What a deep dive into something many of us thought we had figured out. The big takeaway today seems crystal clear, true, effective empathy in leadership. It's not really about just absorbing what others feel. It's about cultivating your own deep self-awareness and learning to regulate your own emotional state first. Like you said, you can't be a calm lifeguard if you can't swim yourself.
Precisely. And that regulated state, that internal coherence in a leader, it sends out these powerful ripples. It doesn't just impact your own focus and decisions. It fundamentally affects your team's collective state, their ability to handle challenges, their creativity, their overall well-being. So yeah, this isn't just, a nice to have personal development thing. It's actually a core strategic imperative for any organization that wants to be resilient, innovative, and frankly, human. So maybe the provocative thought to leave you with today is this. What's one small, truly deliberate practice you could bring into your week? Just one thing to become more aware of your own internal state, maybe right before you walk into that next meeting or conversation. And just notice, how might that single conscious moment of self-awareness ripple outwards? How might it shift the dynamic, even slightly, in that very next interaction you have? Something to think about.
That was today's Forbes edition of AI Cafe Conversations. Remember this, empathy without self-awareness is an empty gesture. Neuroscience shows us that when leaders understand their own minds, they can truly connect, inspire, and transform. Whether you are an executive, an HR leader, or coach, use these insights and even the right AI coaching tools to deepen your leadership, one honest reflection at a time. Thank you for listening. Share this with the leader who needs to hear it, and join me next week on Wednesday for our regular, more human-centered conversations at the Café. If you have any questions, please email me at sahar@saharconsulting.com. My website is saharconsulting.com. Show me some love. Give me a like, share, subscribe, and show it to someone that needs to hear it today. Till next time.